Nancy's birthday turned out to be not very joyful. The children congratulated her the evening before, as they had urgent matters to attend to today. And the sensitive heart of a mother did not miss the fact that they seemed to have remembered it by chance. The congratulations were awkward. They simply rushed in for 10 minutes, handed Nancy flowers and a bright gift bag containing a box of chocolates and a cosmetics set. As they say, the attention was there. What more could she wish for? However, Nancy desperately wanted more warmth and involvement. Her husband was late from work altogether. During his lunch break, he called and said, "Let's celebrate properly on the weekend. I'm so swamped at work that I can barely manage to have lunch." He said all this with his mouth full of food. Nancy just sighed because over the years of married life, she had come to know Derek all too well. Most likely, he would lay on the couch in front of the TV on the weekend, and when his wife reminded him of the birthday celebration, he would start looking for 1,001 excuses to stay home. For example, he might say it was too cold outside or that his back was aching. If she did manage to persuade him to go to a restaurant, Derek would sit there with such an expression on his face that she would regret her suggestion 100 times over. Besides, he had only mentioned the round date to calm her down, Nancy thought sadly. Last year had been a real anniversary, 50 years. But Derek didn't even think about celebrating this occasion ceremoniously. They simply went to a restaurant for a couple of hours, and not even on the actual day. "By the way, Nancy," Derek continued, chewing on something, "my mom and sister." Nancy disconnected from what she heard, in a mild state of shock. So instead of her husband, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law would come to her celebration. It wasn't that she had bad relations with Derek's relatives, but she certainly didn't expect this turn of events. Moreover, they lived in a neighboring town, which meant they would likely plan to stay overnight, which didn't add to Nancy's optimism. The women arrived an hour later and settled at the late table. The holiday, along with her mood, was saved only by her friend Gwen. She burst into Nancy's apartment like a whirlwind of colors and emotions. A bright, colorful dress, which would look ridiculous on another woman, looked stunning on Gwen. The friend's look was completed by massive wooden jewelry and bright red lipstick. Derek's mother and sister exchanged glances when the guest flew into the living room, bringing festive spirit with her. At the table, Nancy was simply a magnificent hostess. She always had freshly prepared food even on regular days, and on her birthday, she outdid herself: several types of salads, beautifully arranged meat and fish platters, and a hot dish that smelled incredible. Nancy served baked potatoes made from a special recipe. They were irresistible, but the birthday girl herself was not in a very cheerful mood. Noticing this, Gwen signaled to her, as if to say, "Isn't it time to check the pie in the oven?" Nancy gratefully seized the opportunity to spend some time in the kitchen without the curious eyes of her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. "It's all because you spoiled them," Gwen said, firmly closing the kitchen door. "You put the needs of your household above your own. And that's wrong. Just tell me honestly, are you happy about Wendy and Tiffany coming?" Nancy shook her head negatively. "That's exactly what I thought," Gwen continued. "I can understand if your husband and kids were sitting at the table. But why did they come? To eat delicious food and sleep on the pristine sheets that you just finished ironing half an hour ago?" She sighed and recalled how a few months ago, she and Nancy had escaped for a couple of days to their friend Kirby's house. No sooner had they arrived than Derek started calling her. He was hungry. As if she hadn't prepared enough food for him to last 3 days and packed it all into containers. He couldn't even find them in the fridge, like a 3-year-old child. Though even kids were more resourceful than that. Remember that time? Gwen couldn't help but smile. You wanted to run to catch the last suburban train just so Derek wouldn't starve to death in front of a fridge full of food. Luckily, I talked you out of it. Meanwhile, her friend continued, by the way, about the kids. I still can't understand why you did their assignments for them. Were you handing out diplomas instead? Remember how Lawrence was sleeping while you spent the whole night making some intricate craft for his shop class? I love my husband and kids and want to take care of them. Is that so bad? Nancy disagreed with her friend. That's just wonderful. But only if it doesn't come at the expense of yourself. Gwen had a firm stance on this. You've spoiled them. But maybe he's saving something for the evening? When he comes back from work? Nancy tried to justify Derek. Derek doesn't even think about making you happy, Gwen shrugged. For him, it's just another day like any other. Except that dinner will be more exquisite, thanks to his mother and sister. Nancy remained silent. Deep down, she completely agreed with her friend, but that didn't make her feel any better. Meanwhile, Gwen continued, I taught my kids right away that their mom is a person, not a pack horse. Want to wear the blue blouse from the closet tomorrow, daughter? Well, you can iron it yourself first. Husband asks if there's something to snack on at home? Of course, there is, dear. Open the fridge, and everything you see is yours. No food? Off you go to the store. At least I'm a good hostess, Nancy thought to herself. Gwen's family often relied on convenience foods or ordered takeout. Nancy was quite skeptical about that. After all, nothing could be tastier or healthier than home-cooked meals made by caring hands. Gwen, however, hardly spent any time at the stove in her own home. She cooked rarely, only a couple of times a month, but she was happy. Instead of spending hours in the kitchen, she would hop on a bike with her husband and kids and set off to conquer new routes. On the other hand, Nancy's house was always clean and orderly. There were several dishes on the table to please all family members. Oh. And for Gwen's birthday, her husband threw such a party that the guests talked about it for months, reminiscing about how great it was. Suddenly, Nancy remembered and felt a twinge of envy towards her best friend for the first time. If before she had looked at Gwen with a sense of superiority, after all, Gwen wasn't as good a hostess, now Nancy viewed the situation from a completely different angle. She realized that her deep unhappiness was entirely her own fault. Nancy began to analyze the situation. To them, she was merely a working tool, she thought bitterly. Her main duties were to prepare, serve, clean, and do. And this was despite the fact that Nancy wasn't just a housewife, she worked full-time on a 24-hour on-call schedule at the City Rescue Service. After a tough shift, her only desire was to get to her pillow and sleep for at least 5 to 6 hours. But that didn't always happen. If her kids or husband urgently needed something from her, they wouldn't hesitate to wake Nancy up. Their criterion for urgency was quite original, it simply had to be done. For example, if Derek suddenly remembered that he had an unironed shirt for a business meeting, he would knock on the door. Nancy, get up and shuffle like a zombie to the ironing board. The same story applied to the kids. Nancy and Derek had 2 children, a son and a daughter, who were born just a year apart. Throughout their childhood, Nancy tried to be the perfect mother for them. She took them to developmental classes, read them books, and visited museums and theaters. In return, she became a reliable support for them. Nancy never refused to help them with their homework, and Lawrence and Cheryl took advantage of that. They often offloaded difficult assignments like crafts, drawings, or reports onto their mom, while they calmly went off to do their own things. It was as if Nancy was attending school 3 times, once for herself and twice for her children. But now Lawrence and Cheryl had grown up. After receiving their coveted school diplomas, they fluttered out of the parental nest into independent life. The kids enrolled at a university in a neighboring city, so they were provided with dormitory accommodations. Lawrence and Cheryl now rarely thought of their parents, mostly limiting their communication to infrequent calls. And when they did talk, it was so reluctantly, as if they were doing Nancy a favor. "Mom, why are you calling me?" Cheryl complained one day. "All normal people text. It's faster and more convenient. Or at least leave voice messages. I spend so much time on this nonsense." Nancy felt hurt by her daughter's words and decided to teach her a lesson. She didn't call the kids for 2 weeks, although she spent all that time on edge. Despite missing her little ones, Nancy remained steadfast. Her patience was rewarded when Cheryl unexpectedly called her and started chattering. "Mommy, hi. How are you? I've missed you so much." Nancy felt a weight lift from her heart. After all, her daughter wasn't insensitive, she was just very busy with her studies. How happy she was to receive Cheryl's call. They chatted sweetly for a few minutes about various topics, and then Cheryl started asking, "Mom, all my hopes are on you. Help me write my term paper. The topic is so complicated, and I know you're well versed in it." Help in Cheryl's language meant do it for me and do it quickly. Nancy immediately remembered how, while in school, her daughter hardly wrote any reports or papers without her mother's assistance. Cheryl always managed to turn things around so that Nancy would eagerly rush to help. But now, Nancy decided that her children were grown up enough to take responsibility for their studies themselves. She gently but firmly refused her daughter, stating that term papers and reports were now exclusively Cheryl's responsibility. Her daughter apparently held a grudge against her again and minimized their communication. That's why the kids didn't bother to go beyond the hallway to congratulate Nancy the day before her birthday. Lawrence awkwardly handed his mom a bouquet of 5 not-so-fresh chrysanthemums, while Cheryl shoved a gift bag into her hands. In fact, Nancy always taught her children that birthday gifts should be given either on the day of the celebration or in advance if you know you can't make it. But the kids considered this to be silly superstitions. Cheryl even declared, "There are 3 hours left until your birthday, so the celebration has already begun." Nancy still thanked her children and offered them to stay overnight, but Lawrence and Cheryl deliberately declined. They needed to catch a train. As they stood at the door calling a taxi, Nancy accidentally overheard a snippet of their conversation. It turned out the kids had been invited to someone's birthday party today, but something had gone wrong. So, they thought of giving this gift to their mother since her birthday was the next day. Hearing this soured Nancy's mood. She couldn't sleep a wink all night, pondering where she had gone wrong in raising her beloved children. It could be said that Nancy's birthday was spoiled from the very beginning. Gwen still tried to bring some liveliness to the women's company, but even she found it difficult. Finally, her friend went home. Evening arrived. Nancy's mother-in-law and sister-in-law settled comfortably on the couch in the living room, engrossed in watching TV. Nancy went to the kitchen to wash the few dishes, given the small number of guests. Her mind was swirling with unhappy thoughts. When I'm not needed by the kids, they brush me off like a pesky fly. But as soon as they need something, it's "Mommy, help me." I'm tired of this, she thought, vigorously scrubbing a plate. Derek. I'm just a nobody to him. When was the last time he gave me flowers or even said something kind? I always meet him with an open heart and soul. I greet him with a hot dinner after work. The wet plate slipped from her hands and broke. Well, I'm just like that plate, Nancy sighed as she cleaned up the shards. First, they use me, and when I break, they don't even notice. Tears streamed from her eyes. She sat in the middle of the kitchen, sobbing uncontrollably. What's wrong? Is it really just because of the broken dishes? Derek asked cheerfully. It turned out he had already come home from work, and Nancy, filling a glass with water from the tap, hadn't even heard him. You women are such strange creatures, always teary-eyed over the slightest thing. Nancy stopped crying and just looked at her husband, saying nothing. Good, Derek praised her. That's much better. Now let's go see what gift I brought you. The sadness instantly faded. Apparently, Derek hadn't forgotten her birthday. She suddenly remembered, oh, wait, let me serve you dinner in the living room. There's a nice big table there. Maybe your mom and sister will join us too? Of course we will, Tiffany said, helping Nancy carry the plates to the living room. You made such delicious baked potatoes. Nancy busied herself in the kitchen, mentally scolding herself, what's wrong with me? Derek worked all day and couldn't get free earlier. But he prepared a gift. This means he loves me and finally appreciates me. Everyone sat down at the table. Have a little snack. Derek finally came out of the room and said, and now for the gift. I wonder what it is. Nancy thought to herself. Maybe it's the new phone I've been dreaming about. Or some jewelry. Her imagination ran dry as Derek was already handing her the gift. Look what I brought, he proudly announced, handing Nancy a mop. You complained that the old handle had dried out. I wanted to make you happy. This is a super modern model. Cleaning the floors with it will be a pleasure. Now you can clean with joy. Seeing the gift, Nancy's hands dropped, and the smile vanished from her face. Silence hung in the room. Oh, Tiffany was the first to speak, bursting into laughter. You really got us. I almost believed it, and I didn't know my son was a comedian. I second that, Wendy added. Nancy looked at her husband in confusion, as if asking him, is this a joke, or did he seriously decide to give his wife a mop? Derek remained silent. It seemed he was searching for the right words. Oh, forget you all, he finally said bitterly. After this, I won't want to give you any gifts. And he went to his room, slamming the door loudly. Wendy put her hand to her mouth and sat there, not knowing where to look. It was clear that she was ashamed of her son. Tiffany even choked on the potato she had praised just a few minutes before. Wendy patted her daughter on the back. You know what, Nancy, the mother-in-law addressed her daughter-in-law, let's stay with Tiffany today. She nudged her daughter in the side. Yes, of course, right, Tiffany reacted. You have enough trouble without us. I'll go call us a taxi. 15 minutes later, Wendy and Tiffany left, and Nancy remained sitting on the couch in the living room, utterly bewildered. 10 years ago, Nancy came up with the idea of having family dinners once a month. The children, who were still small at the time, particularly supported her enthusiasm and enjoyed helping their mother prepare various treats and then set the table. Of course, over the years, their zeal faded somewhat, but Lawrence and Cheryl still tried not to miss the family get-togethers. This time, Nancy was preparing for the family dinner with special excitement. She missed the kids, as she hadn't seen them for almost a month. She wanted to sit at the table with them and leisurely ask how they were doing. Her husband was gone all day at work. They hadn't really communicated either. After her birthday, Tiffany had high hopes for the family dinner. It was a chance to bring everyone together and have a heartfelt conversation. About half an hour remained before the appointed time. Nancy was bustling in the kitchen, taking care of the final preparations. Suddenly, her son Lawrence called. Mom, I can't come. I was invited to a birthday party, he said on the phone. What? But why didn't you say anything earlier? Nancy asked, bewildered. It was a last-minute thing. I didn't know until the last moment whether she would celebrate. And then she decided. Who is Lena? It's a girl I like. Remember, I told you about her? This is the first I've heard of her, Nancy said confidently. It doesn't matter, her son interrupted. Birthdays happen once a year, I can't miss it. I picked out such a gift for Lena, you'll be amazed. He said. Nancy looked at her phone screen in confusion. So he's going to the girl's birthday party, and even bringing a gift. And he gave me withered chrysanthemums for my birthday, she thought bitterly. Once again, the incoming call signal sounded. This time, Cheryl wanted to talk to her mom. Mom, I finished writing the first chapter of my term paper. Can you transfer it to the flash drive right away? I'm afraid I'll forget. Oh, I completely forgot about it, Nancy realized. Are you serious? Cheryl's voice took on a tone of anger. Do you even understand how you've let me down? We'll figure something out, Nancy began to defend herself. What is there to figure out? I have to submit the theoretical part on Monday. What am I supposed to do now? Cheryl hung up the phone without even letting her mother finish speaking. No matter how much Nancy tried to reach her daughter, she simply wouldn't pick up. Nancy already guessed that, like Lawrence, Cheryl wouldn't come to the family dinner. Well, let's have a couple's dinner with Derek, Nancy thought with a sad smile. It'll be something like a date. Derek arrived right on time. Nancy was just taking French meat out of the oven. Go wash your hands, we'll sit down at the table soon, Nancy said. And I didn't come to you empty-handed, Derek said with a sly smile. In his hands, he held a velvet box. Look, he said. Nancy took the box and, with a racing heart, lifted the lid. Oh, what a beauty! Inside the box lay an intricately made gold brooch, adorned with blue stones that looked like sapphires. It's magnificent! Nancy couldn't hide her delight. I can't take my eyes off it. Yes, I liked it right away too. It was clear that Derek was flattered by his wife's reaction. Okay, let me put it away so it doesn't get lost. Nancy, who had already wanted to take the brooch in her hands and examine it closely, looked at her husband in confusion. It's a gift for Tiffany, Derek explained. I hope my sister will like it. So this is for Tiffany? Nancy shouted. Why are you yelling? Yes, it's for her. Tiffany is retiring in a week. For such an event, the gift should be appropriate, Derek declared proudly. But noticing his wife's piercing gaze, he hurried to another room, taking a velvet box with him. When he returned to the kitchen a couple of minutes later, Nancy was clearing the table. Derek watched in surprise as his wife ruthlessly put everything into containers and sent them to the fridge. But we haven't even eaten yet, Derek said, astonished. But Nancy walked out and closed the door behind her. Only her best friend could listen to and sincerely sympathize with Nancy, so she headed straight to her. See how she swept you away. I warned you. What good is it that the whole family is living off you? And here's the result, Gwen said, sitting next to Nancy and giving her a tight hug. And you know what? Stay at my dacha for a while. It takes you almost the same amount of time to get to work as from home. What do you have to lose? Plus, let your husband finally find out what it's like without Mommy. I wish I could, Nancy hesitated. Stop it. You won't be bothering anyone. My husband hates the dacha, he's a city dweller to the bone, just like the kids. So I'm usually the only one at the dacha, Gwen confidently said. Nancy thought, husbands and wives should relax together, but it's not my business how anyone else lives. If everyone is okay with it, then fine. For example, Derek and I have vacationed together for so many years, like a thread and needle. And what do we get? A mop for my birthday. But in Gwen's family, apparently, there was complete bliss. All right, you've convinced me, Nancy unexpectedly agreed, surprising even herself. Nancy left for Gwen's dacha without telling anyone about her decision. On the way, she ran through several scenarios in her head, each involving her husband humbly repenting and realizing how bad he felt without her. However, days went by, and no one called Nancy. Derek only called on the third day. "Nancy, are you at the store or something? Don't forget to buy cheese, we're out. I haven't been home for 3 days, and you just noticed?" Nancy replied, surprised. 3 days? I had no idea, Derek mumbled. I thought you were upset with me and went to sleep in the kids' room. No wonder I noticed the food running out in the fridge. When are you planning to come back? I don't know yet, Nancy snapped. Consider it my vacation, she said. But who will iron my shirts? I'm running out of them, Derek asked, puzzled. And I would like some freshly cooked food. The iron is in the cupboard across from the bathroom, and the store is just a 2-minute walk from the house, Nancy calmly suggested and hung up. Just a week ago, upon hearing the melancholy notes in her husband's voice, she would have rushed to him on the nearest train, knowing that Derek was like a child at home and completely dependent on her. However, she was no longer satisfied with this distribution of roles. Now Nancy wanted to feel like a woman, not a housewife. What were her days like before? Nancy had to get up at 6 a.m. to prepare breakfast for everyone and get them off to work and school. Even on her days off, she couldn't allow herself to rest. But now, getting up for her shift at 7:30, Nancy was surprised to find that she arrived at work even 5 minutes earlier than usual. She also started watching a series she had postponed for 6 months and devoured her favorite romance novels in the evenings. To her surprise, Nancy once again felt like a woman, attractive and desired. One day, a neighbor waved at her and shouted, "Good morning, beautiful." Gwen, hearing this, chuckled approvingly but warned, "The neighbor is definitely a womanizer. Be careful with him." Nancy just laughed. After all these years, no one has ever stolen me away from Derek. I'm not afraid of any neighbor. Of course, she had no intention of cheating on her husband. But it was incredibly nice to feel men's gazes on her again. Meanwhile, when Derek had arranged a romantic evening a few months ago while she was wearing a revealing black dress, he paid more attention to the roles she had prepared. Derek started calling more often, but Nancy wasn't in a hurry to go home. "I have a stomach ache from the pizza," Derek complained. "And the iron doesn't smooth anything out at all. I'm walking around wrinkled. How do you even use it?" He said it in a joking manner, but Nancy wasn't in the mood for laughter. Only now, after so many years of marriage, did she realize that Derek was a domestic invalid. The kids also began to call. Their son was the first. "Have you decided to play the rebel at your age?" he exclaimed indignantly. And Cheryl couldn't stop thinking about her term paper. Apparently, they had extended the deadline for her. "You still live in the countryside and do nothing. Don't you feel bad about helping me with my term paper?" whined their daughter. "Write it yourself," Nancy cut her off. "You're already an adult. It's time to take responsibility for your studies. Remember how much I did for you in school? That's enough." Cheryl decided to change her tactics. "Of course, you always did everything for me. You spoiled me, and now you want to teach me a lesson. It's not about that. I just want you to be a decent person. Am I not decent now? Cheryl asked, surprised. No, Nancy replied firmly. I'm still waiting for your apology. Cheryl said, confusion in her voice. For what? Nancy asked, astonished. For yelling at me about my term paper. For ruining the family dinner that you didn't even show up for. Do you think I'll just tolerate it? No way, enough. When Nancy returned home, she saw Derek trying to maintain cleanliness and order, but he wasn't very successful. There was dust everywhere, greasy streaks on the plates, and dark stains on the cups. The refrigerator was completely empty, only a pizza box lay in the trash can. Nancy wanted to go throw out the garbage, but stopped herself just in time. No, I didn't take a vacation for my soul and body just to get back into the same old rut, she thought. When Derek returned from work, he was happy to see his wife. Let's get started on cleaning. I'll teach you household skills. Believe me, there's nothing difficult about it, and they're very useful in life. More pizza. Her husband lamented. I can't stand seeing it anymore. Sorry, Nancy shrugged, I can't cook in such a pigsty. And let's agree, from now on, household chores will be shared, including cooking. So half of the dinners are your responsibility. Gwen has brainwashed you. Derek said, annoyed. She didn't brainwash me, she showed me how to be happy, Nancy replied confidently. We can make this work. Derek snorted in displeasure but sat down to eat the pizza anyway. Over the next few days, Nancy patiently explained to her husband what needed to be done around the house. Now it was his turn to cook dinner every other day. To be honest, the first attempts were simply awful, even inedible. But Nancy encouraged her husband, trying not to upset him. Cheryl was also actively supporting her mom's initiative. So, will our family lunch take place? I really want to see you. Her daughter burst out on the phone. We can meet any time that's convenient, Nancy replied. But I can't do lunch. I have too little free time to waste it standing by the stove. Just be careful, Mom, her daughter warned. Men don't like independent wives. What if Dad leaves for another woman? At that moment, Nancy realized that she might have gone a bit too far. There should be a measure in everything. She had gotten carried away playing the strict wife. A loud crash came from the kitchen. Nancy rushed to the noise and saw the scene. Derek was at the stove, surrounded by pots and bowls, with pieces of beets and carrots scattered on the table and floor. I accidentally dropped a bowl, her husband explained, already picking it up and washing it. What are you cooking? Borscht, Derek said, a bit shyly. Remember how I used to make it back in college when you came to visit me? Of course, I remember. You decided to make it again. By the way, sit at the table, let's taste it. Nancy obediently sat down at the table. So, how is it? Tasty? Derek asked, sounding almost childlike. Very. Nancy said with feeling. To be honest, she was so surprised by the changes in her husband that she couldn't even distinguish the flavors. But she was pleased that Derek wanted to surprise her. She looked at him and realized that he was the most beloved and dear person in the world. Nancy smiled, remembering how it all started. Cleaning and cooking were indeed not as difficult as they had seemed at first. She felt that everything would definitely be all right for them.